Hello and welcome to yet another beautiful and exciting episode of the NGOCC Podcast. I am your host, Chivesa Cecilia Mungulube, and on today's episode, I'm not alone. I'm joined by a very great woman who is a gender activist, Madam Naomi Ngambi, who will be discussing with us a very interesting topic. Good afternoon and welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon and thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yes. Now I'm super excited to host her on this week's episode, where we are going to be discussing the ILO Convention, to be particular C190, which is the aspect that deals with the protection, harassment, and other sectors that she's going to be able to explain for us. Now, in the previous episode, we were in the community of Baoleni at Katambalala Market, and you saw me interact with some marketeers regarding the participation of women in politics. So do take time to just look at that episode and learn something from it. Now, back to the issue, back to the topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Let me welcome you to the podcast and just allow you to introduce yourself so that people can know you. Who is Madam Naomi Ngambi?
Okay, so my full names are Naomi Lunat Ngambi. I'm determined, passionate woman, especially when it comes to issues of gender equality and women empowerment. Mm-hmm. Of course, gender covers both men and women, but I do have a special bias towards women because even if we're in majority, we are the most marginalized in Zambia. In fact, I think all over the world. So I work for the Zambia Congress of Trade Unions. I'm the director in charge of gender, youth, and child development. So every day I go to an office where I seek to amplify the voice of women. Women need to be heard. Their voices need to be valued. And that's what I do. I also give a gender perspective to our affiliate unions. As you know, ZCTU is the biggest, largest workers' federation in Zambia. And it does represent over 500,000 workers cutting across all sectors. And that is where my work begins. And it's just to give a gender perspective on how we should treat our women in the world of work, how we should treat our men in the world of work. Labor is not a commodity. You need to work in an environment where you are respected, where you are dignified. And so that's what I do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I also have a lot of fun because people say I work for ZCTU, but really ZCTU works for me because it has given me an opportunity to meet a lot of women in the market through our associate groups, Azia and Avema, and just meet women in all sectors, teachers, nurses, doctors, lawyers. And, it's very interesting that, people say that women don't have a voice, but we do have a voice. Mm-hmm. And this is where the trade unions come in. We want to make sure that women who are taking part in, just making the wheels of Zambia grow economically, we need to uplift them. And they need to be treated with respect, despite their reproductive roles.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Now, before we dive into the topic of discussion, let's talk about ZCTU. What is ZCTU really, and what are some of the things that it does?
Okay, so ZCTU was established through an act of parliament in 1965, just after independence. And ZCTU is the only institution or organization which has been mandated by government to speak for the worker. Mm-hmm. And this means ZCTU, through its affiliates, looks at the workers' plight. It looks at coming up with good conditions of service through a process called the collective bargaining process. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about what led to the establishment of the gender department or gender unit at ZCTU. I understand that you are the director for the gender unit. So what led to the establishment of the gender unit?
The establishment of the gender unit was at the behest of the women members, because before the establishment of that desk, issues of workers' rights and women empowerment they were being handled by a committee called the Women Committee, but they needed a secretariat, they needed an office which would link the women members and the secretariat, which is as the CTU. So it was at the behest of the women members, and it was established in 1998. I'm actually the third person to sit in that office.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And how has your experience been so far from the time that you took office as head of the department?
When I tell you that I'm determined,
Tell me about it.
the experience has been good because, when I say that a lot of women are marginalized, we are marginalized everywhere in society, even in the workplace. And what makes this marginalization worse is the indifference that people have when they're looking at the plight of women workers. For you to be in the office, for you to be in the market, you have the right to be there. You have the right to work as a woman, even if you are giving birth, even if you are having children, you are having menstrual cycles. You need to earn money. It is a right for a woman to work. And this is now where the drama starts because, and I'll tell you, COVID-19 gave us a very good example on how issues of women working are dealt with. When you look at COVID-19, the majority of people who lost their jobs were women. Even this time, for a woman to enter the labor market or the labor force, people really frown on it, especially these organizations which just want to make money. They don't want to employ you, Cecilia, even if you have gone to school, even if you have not gone to school, because sooner or later you have a child, you get pregnant, you have a child. There will be someone in the community who will be sick. And the way the society has been crafted, it will be you to look after that person. Yeah. So you find that organizations really don't want to employ women because they think it's costly. But this is why the Human Rights Treaty is all about. Even if you are giving birth, you are also supposed to be valued. And part of that value is allowing you to earn a living to look after yourself. Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, ma'am, recently we saw Zambia ratifying to the ILO Convention C190, of which I have seen something from it. So let's talk about it. What is it all about?
So C190 is an international labor standard which seeks, and hear me properly on this one, which is the first international treaty to eliminate any forms of violence and harassment in the world of work. When we talk about the world of work, Cecilia, we're just not talking about an office. C190 covers everybody. It covers the rural woman, anybody who's just trying to make a living through producing either goods and services is protected by C190. It wants to make sure that wherever women are, wherever men are, they're treated in a decent manner. Because, and I'll tell you one thing, C190 came at the behest of the trade unions. Why? Because there was not a law which could exclusively, comprehensively cover the plight of the woman in the world of work. Issues of sexual harassment. Okay? And also recognizing that gender-based violence, domestic violence, which happens in the society, also has an effect on productivity. So it also follows you to the workplace. So C190 is a fantastic piece of legislation which Zambia has ratified. And by the way, Zambia is the 10th country in Africa to ratify Convention C190. And it wants to remedy all these things that we are talking about, issues of harassment. And I'll tell you one thing. When we say violence and harassment, most of the time we are thinking exclusively of sexual harassment. Gender-based violence takes on many vicious forms. And this is why we are so interested as trade unions to ensure that whenever these forms want to manifest in the world of work, to hinder a young woman like you from accessing her rights in the workplace, we have already formed policies which protect you. And we already have reporting mechanisms where you are able to report whatever happens to you, whenever it manifests. able to report it, and you are taken care of. I think for a long time, organizations have not looked at gender-based violence from a survivor's perspective. You remain a victim because usually most of these cases are thrown away, and a victim has to go away without getting any justice. So C190 really is a wonderful, wonderful legislation which brings hope to us as women in Zambia.
You've talked about the reporting mechanism. Do you have anything established as ZCTU regarding how women can report or how people in workplaces can report, and how are you communicating this message to ensure that it reaches everyone?
Yes. When you look at Section 95 of the Employment Code Act, number 3 of 2019, there is a section that compels all workers to have gender-responsive policies, and I should think one of them is anti-sexual harassment policy. Because you see, we need to regulate the workplace, and without it being guided by a very good, robust policy, then we'll see most of these things seeping through the walls, and you see women being harassed. So we are talking about formulating policies, gender-responsive policies that will comprehensively cover you. And one good, and C190 has got very key features. One feature is, and I like this feature because it looks at gender-based violence from the time you leave home. So for those people who do night work, those who work long hours, who go to work early, there's a special feature that says the employer should provide reasonable transport for this person, because some of these crimes have happened during the commute to work. And also, C190 shifts the burden of proof from the perpetrator to the victim. I think most of the cases that we've had concerning gender-based violence have really gone under the radar because, first of all, we didn't have reporting mechanisms. And secondly, it was his word against hers. The burden of proof was merely on the victim, not on the perpetrator. But now, C190 has got this redeeming feature, which now makes the perpetrator account for what he did. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the things that you've implemented or put in place at ZCTU to ensure that all the firms or organizations are aware of this and that workers are properly protected in their workplaces, especially the women?
Yes.
And also, what does this treaty mean for the women of Zambia?
This is a redeeming feature for women because we want women to get into workplaces. We want to add value to them. We want them to get promoted. We want to even extend this feature to women in politics. We want the women, as they are vying to take leadership positions, maybe a member of parliament, a councillor, to be protected by C190 because she deserves to be there. All genders do well when they are sitting at the table. So we want women to sit at the table with men and make decisions that best govern their constituency. Yeah. So C190 will do that because it will come up with very good policies that are able to safeguard the nobility of work, especially that of women. So just to answer your question, ZCTU has formulated policies, and as we speak now, we are doing a lot of capacity building on what C190 is. Most people don't know what C190 is. In fact, most women don't even know the forms of gender-based violence which are actually happening now in the world of work. Wherever there's no information, I believe there's abuse. So the first thing that we've done is do a lot of capacity building in the organizations. You need to know what your rights are, first of all, as a woman. There's this thing whereby people think when you enter the workplace, then your rights remain at the door. No. The institution must make sure that they enhance these rights. You need to be protected. So, capacity building on your rights as a human being, but also employment law. People don't know that it is a right for you to go on Mother's Day. And this was fought for by the trade unions themselves. You need to get one day off to look after yourself, especially those ladies who have strong cycles, okay? But also just, even how to be a better human being in society. I'll tell you, the relevance of trade unions is not only in the workplace. The trade unions must also be relevant in society. So we have special programs that build your capacity, enhance your knowledge on your knowledge base on what your rights are.
Very interesting. Now, what do you think this means to the woman out there who is a career woman and perhaps has faced sort of harassment somehow? Because you agree with me that most of the time, the ones that are very vulnerable are the women in workplaces.
Yes.
For you to get promoted, you have to do something, your payment in kind, to maybe somebody who is higher than you before you get that promotion. So what do you think this ratification means for the woman out there?
For me, it brings hope. It's not only for that woman, but also for the would-be mothers. Do you know that some women are just penalized for being a woman? There's no future of Zambia if women are not giving birth to children, and these children are not being well nourished. So the labor laws are also important. But also, I think what I'm really so passionate about is that you get the information that you require. Yes, there are a lot of women who are abused because sometimes they don't know their rights. Secondly, they didn't have any reporting mechanisms. There are policies out there, but they have a key feature which is missing, and that is reporting mechanisms. Where do you report? When do you report? How do you report? So if these features are not there in the workplace policies, then already you are being victimized 30 times. So we must make sure that the working women, the laws are there. When you look at the employment code, it has gender responsive features, which are at its most minimum. And this is why I say join a union. Women are happy in unions because based on the structure of the trade unions, they are able to negotiate for better conditions of maternity protection. Yeah, even just when looking at issues of getting promoted, many women face discrimination when they're getting promoted. Even women in politics, we don't want anyone to call anybody a name when they're just trying to get their rightful position in society. And it's not bad for a woman to vie for a leadership position. There's a saying which says, when you educate a woman, you educate a village. So it's very good for us as Zambia to look at the plight of women, even economically. You cannot uplift Zambia from poverty if a very important sector of the economy is being marginalized, if we're not being given opportunities. So you cannot have economic development without gender equality. Yeah.
Now, that's a very beautiful response, by the way. Now, there's a lot of harassment going on even in learning institutions. I think we had a pre-conversation about this.
Yeah.
Does this law also apply at learning institutions? Or maybe is there a way, as ZCTU, you're assisting these young girls that perhaps are maybe being subjected to any form of harassment at learning institutions? Because I believe this is quite common.
The outreach of C190 is quite wide. It looks after the intern. It looks after these people who have just left college. It looks after people who have retired. It looks after everybody. It looks after everybody, and we need to do a lot when it comes to capacity building, especially in the higher learning institutions, because that is where GBV is quite rampant, this issue of sex for grades. And I think that I know that the future of Zambia lies in the young people. Now, when we destroy the young people who are in learning institutions, then we are destroying the future of Zambia. We need to value young people. And how do we value them? We must make sure that we protect them wherever they are by safeguarding them from perpetrators and also just giving them the education that they require, because sometimes they do not know that they can sometimes harass somebody. But when we give them that education, it will also help to protect them from getting into behaviors that will eventually, make them unproductive. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Your word of advice, ma'am, as we wrap up this conversation, to the young woman out there, to the young girl out there, regarding maybe having that sense of protection in their work of space, or maybe perhaps how they can handle any form of harassment that might come their way.
I would say that they are not alone and they are not voiceless, because institutions like Zambia Congress of Trade Unions is there to speak for them. But also I would say that, we need to, we really need to make sure that they're exposed to the information that we have. And whoever is being harassed or whoever has lost employment because somebody has harassed them, let them get in touch with their unions. Let them get in touch with the unions, because there's always hope. Let them get in touch with the unions. You are not the one who is supposed to leave employment because you're beautiful or because you're a woman. Let the perpetrator leave that office for you, and they should allow you to earn a living so that you can protect your family. I'll tell you that the most unfortunate thing about gender-based violence that people don't really sometimes understand, and this is why there's a lot of indifference in handling these cases, is that people do not realize the horrible consequences of gender-based violence on a victim. People lose their identity, they lose their confidence. They also sometimes are hounded out of the workplace. And hounding a woman out of the workplace, there's so many people behind that woman. She's paying school fees. She's looking after parents. So it actually robs a lot of people from, just gaining gainful employment. And that is why we must get rid of this vicious GBV, which is really plaguing the world of work, because it has very horrible consequences on a woman. And remember, this woman is just not a woman in the workplace. She is a member of a society. And imagine 5 to 10 women being victims of gender-based violence. I think that is a very big number to be abused like that. Yeah, so I would say that there's hope. There's a voice for you. If you've been harassed, get in touch with the union or get in touch with the Ministry of Labor, or just come to us. We will be able to help you. So joining a union is good. Joining a union is good for you as a woman.
Yeah. Perhaps you could tell them how they can get in touch with ZCTU, or perhaps how they can reach you, just in case they would like to.
Okay, so we do have a website. We do have our offices, and then Buluwe Road in Woodlands, Nyumbayanga. You can visit us there, or you can just get in touch with us through our affiliates. They know how to get hold of us. But the thing is, don't leave work because somebody is harassing you. You need to come to our offices so that we help you. You are not alone.
Very important. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. This has been the NGOCC Podcast. And of course, on today's episode, I was interacting with the head of a gender department at ZCTU. My name is Chibesa Cecilia Mungwe, but of course, don't forget, we discussed various issues surrounding women and of course the protection at workplaces, different types of harassments that we tend to go through as women, as young girls. So please join a union, as she has emphasized. We cannot overemphasize that one, for your own good and for your protection.
Yeah.
We have been discussing the ILO Convention C190, which is protecting the women from harassment and any form of gender-based violence in workplaces. Till next week, it's a goodbye and thank you for watching.
Bye.